Hey, what's up guys? Little man with a big opinion here. Today's video, which of course, as soon as I press play, I get a sick back itch. I want to talk about your operational security and, different components that go into it, how you're, making sure that you're going to make it through this. I think it's one of the, lesser talked about things because I think most of us just, say, when SHTF happens, going underground, no one's gonna know I'm a prepper. And, I've wrote down some things that most of us probably wouldn't realize is going to be a dead giveaway. So, if you have anything else that you want to add to this list, leave it in the comment section down below. Some of the things might only, be based on your situation. Subscribe to the channel, share it with everyone you know. So, if any aspect of, society goes down and people are going without something, if they notice that you have the thing that they are without, that could turn into a problem. Around where I live, most of the homes have fireplaces. We had, our big freeze of this year, didn't have to go to school for about a week. And we had the fireplace running, basically 24/7. For a week straight, we didn't get above freezing. The snow melted a little bit just from the sun. But we've got this nice big old smokestack coming out of the fireplace. Most of the homes also had the same thing going on. It didn't happen this year, but it has happened in the past where other people, for whatever reason, didn't have enough firewood. And, I remember one neighbor had stacked probably a quart's worth of wood on their front porch. And several people had gone to their house. I know the person across the street came and asked my grandpa if they could have a little bit of wood. They offered to pay him because they didn't get enough wood. And, we're the kind of people, we fill up a trailer, back it into the driveway, and have two giant stacks on either side of the house. We probably had 3, maybe 4 cords of wood. We're nice neighbors. We gave them, 20, 30 pieces. I don't know if they paid Grandpa. I just know that I had to fill the wagon up and haul it across the street for them. So, depending on your situation, that could be a dead giveaway. If it's super, super cold outside, smoke from a fire tells anyone in the area, at the very least, those people are warm. If there was a prolonged blackout, smoke from that fire says, at the very least, those people have light. And, the other thing that's associated with fire is, being able to prepare food. And that's a very difficult thing to deal with because smoke from a fire can be seen from miles and miles away. As a prepper, you should have other ways to prepare food. I think that's half the reason why the military made MREs the way that they made them, where you can eat them cold, everything is fully prepared. You can use water, the chemicals, heat your food up so you have a hot meal. But then you get to the realm of, I've driven by people's houses. I've, been in big cities. I've smelt food, that is hot, that's, it's aromas, and it's like, that smells pretty good. That's half the reason why a bunch of people get food in general, is they can smell it. It's one of our senses, and it prompts our bodies to want to seek that out and get it. Electric, stoves, you don't have smoke. Gas or propane, you don't deal with, the excessive amount of smoke. And, I kind of like that I'm building a privacy fence, because now, I don't know if anyone is grilling unless I can hear it, which I have to be very close to hear it, or, they've mixed enough, spices and seasonings that I can then smell it. And even then, you have to be somewhat close. You take out, sight with privacy fences, with not having, smoke go all over the place. That's something that you should, seriously think about. That's also a reason why every single person in my family has a sleeping bag. I don't know the last time my grandmother or my cousin slept in one, but they're designed to keep you comfortable, keep you alive. There's no smoke coming from that. If they can't physically see that you have that item, people are less likely to just keep on going, pass you by. Hand warmers work great for that. So just something to think about there. Anytime that you're preparing any food and people can see it, that's something that you want to think about. Let me look at my list real quick. I'm drawing a blank on the next thing, and I haven't looked at it for a second. Sight plays a big picture in all of this. Haven't done it yet, but having water storage. Nobody knows, other than friends and family, that I've got about a dozen 5-gallon water storage containers in my house and in my shed. They might occasionally see one or two when I go camping, but they don't know the extent of that water storage. And I haven't done it in a while, but growing up in high school, I kept every soda and juice container that we had, and I filled those up with water. I carried them around forever. Was at a point where that was most of my water storage, and it was getting to the point where it was 40-50 gallons, and it was taking multiple trips because water's heavy. Putting in a gutter system and having big old giant rain catchment barrels, that's going to tell someone this person has access to clean drinking water. A very, very simple solution is, again, you put it inside of a privacy fence. But I've also seen people do those decorative little fences, or they put something around it to block its line of sight. You don't know it's there, and now they're less likely to come to you for water. Your home in general. Most of our windows have blinds over them. The only window that doesn't have blinds, and I know this is kind of contradicting most of what I'm saying, is all the plants that we grow. We've got a big set of windows that, it kind of acts like a greenhouse until it's time to put them outside. And several of my coworkers are like, you've got these big old bright lights on at night. What are you growing in there? And I think it helps out that we live in a rural community and lots of people around us grow gardens, so it's not out of the ordinary for us. That would more cover outsiders coming in. But, it's one of those things of every other set of windows in the house has some sort of blinds in front of it. My treadmill sits in front of our sliding glass door for the backyard that, we don't use that sliding glass door. We either go out and around or through the utility room, and we've got a door that goes to the backyard there. 99% of the public has no idea that there's a treadmill on the other side of that sliding glass door. Most people probably don't want other people to know that my head is facing this window. There's 3 bedrooms in our house. If someone was trying to, break in, cause harm, do anything like that, they have no idea what window they're going in. One room's an office, one room's the baby's room that he doesn't ever use, and then one room's the bedroom. It's a 1 in 3 chance of actually going in a window where we're at, throwing something at a window where we're at. That's left up to the individual person and, wanting to take that risk. We just installed a motion light on one corner of the house. My grandma's got a motion light on this corner of her house, and we live right next door, so we don't need to put anything there. And, there's plans to put one on, the 2 other corners. Those things are going to work regardless because they've got a little solar panel on them and a little backup battery. And, that is a deterrent in itself. People don't like, that saying, you're in the spotlight. Like, that's legitimately what it's for. You're being focused down and highlighted, regardless of what you're attempting to do. That deters a lot of people in itself. Having a big old dog that barks all night deters people. They hear the dog barking, they think it's going to wake us up, and that helps with security issues. Something that I don't think most people have planned for is your waste. We produce tons of trash a year. Most Americans do. And it's got to go somewhere. So, on one hand, I like having, plastic plates that can easily be, tossed in the dishwasher or cleaned with a sponge. I'll admit, there's plenty of times where I eat on we make dinner, we eat on a paper plate, we can just throw it away and we don't have to worry about that many dishes. We fill up dumpsters every single week with trash, with disposable stuff. It'd be nice if, soda could come in a glass container that, you could just go fill it right back up. You pay your money, and I'm not, tossing out 5 or 6 of these a week. But, it is what it is. if trash is continuing to pile up, that tells people that person has stuff, they're consuming that stuff, and you're not just going to stack your trash up in your house. Short term, you might. It's torrential downpour. Uh, you know, Trash trucks didn't run when it froze. And so, we were able to use the dumpsters or just leave the bag in the trash for an extra few days. The silver lining in a lot of this is most Americans not being prepared like they should. You're not going to stand out that much if everyone else is doing it. I haven't really even begun to talk about electricity. It reminds me of, I think, Dawn of the Dead, when, they were in the mall, they had power, and it was kind of a beacon of hope. If you've got lights on and other people don't have lights on, that's a really good indicator of, if they've got electricity, they've got the normal amenities. Maybe. They might have AC running and it's in the summer. They might have heat running and it's in the winter. They have the ability to entertain themselves with, movies and video games and music. They probably still have power for refrigeration, so they have food that is not spoiled, that would have otherwise spoiled. They might have running water. It depends on where you live. If you lose power, you lose water. A lot of places that doesn't happen, at least short term, because of water towers. But, you're as close to normal as possible. Therefore, we will congregate to this place. And it's tricky because, we've got a gas generator. Gas generators are loud as all get out. I think that's why a lot of preppers push and want, solar or wind, because there's virtually no noise to it. That goes back to, having the curtains. It's probably not the best thing. If a bunch of people are, suffering because it's freezing outside, that's not the time to, be jamming out. Have your music at a level that you can enjoy it. But, again, that goes back to your senses. They can hear that you're having fun. If you're closer to normal, then that might draw people in. A lot of this comes down to your senses. Sight, smell, sound, not really touch. And so the biggest thing that is going to help you out is trying to blend in. If people need food and, there's groups or organizations or whatever that is bringing in food, you're suffering and miserable just like them. You're going to wait in the line. You're going to get your allotment. And that's going to help you out because even though we're preppers, there's no way of knowing, for the most part, when this thing's going to end, how long have you been prepping? Like maybe you have 2 months worth of food saved up. You go get in the line and get that food so that you look like everyone else, and then you bring it home, and depending on what they're like if it's an MRE, I'll probably just add it to the preps. I take those camping and do stuff with them, and I'm gonna eat my normal stuff. I might need to supplement what I have with what they're handing out. Or my stuff is going to supplement what they're giving, because maybe they're giving 1,500 calories worth of food a day. You really need to be consuming, 2,000, 2,400, whatever the number is. They're trying to prolong survival until things can go back to normal. And, you're trying to stay at normal. So, you join the masses. That's the big, simple thing to do. And I know some people would argue, you have what you need, let them, hand out stuff to the people that have nothing. I go back to my days in college. We had a food pantry on campus that you could go once a week, get 10 items. I had a meal plan, I had a job, and the only requirement was being a student on that campus. Or if you're an alumni of that school. Like a 50-year-old could walk in there, if they graduated from the school that I went to, they could use the food pantry. And, I had several friends of mine that would go. And it was supplementing what they had. I wasn't gonna go hungry if I didn't go to the food pantry. But it helped me build more staples. And I looked at it more from the standpoint of, if I go weekly and, eat what I need to eat, get mason jars and Mylar bags and put back what I don't eat. Because, you never know when the food pantry is going to run out, when things fall apart. And, some of that food I still have to today, because, they had some refrigerated stuff that got eaten weekly, and then they had a lot of staples. And, if anything bad ever happens, I'll go, man, I'm really happy my community had that going, and I took advantage of it. If I lost my job, then I'd be worried about food, and those 10 items aren't going to cover all the food that I need for a week. So I was just, stocking up what I could in case something happens. You lose your job, you get injured, the zombie apocalypse happens, and, the prepared mindset in me was, stocking up for a rainy day. I think back to medieval times. They're not going to grow exactly what every person needs to eat for the year. They're hopefully going to grow more so they can put, a month back this year, 2 weeks back this year, a few months back this year. They have no idea if they're going to go through a 1 week, siege from their enemies or a 5-year siege from their enemies. So they're going to try to grow and get as much food as they can possibly get. Which is why I think most preppers never stop prepping. You don't hit the 1 year mark and say, all the problems are going to last 1 year or less, and I'll replace it when it's time to replace it. Best case scenario, none of this stuff ever happens. You don't have anything to worry about. Worst case scenario is whatever happens falls in the realm of stuff that you've, supplied yourself for, and so you never run out of it. Worst case scenario is, a complete collapse where, there's a lot of starting over from scratch. And, in that situation, 1 year is great. You can get a lot done in a year. If you can make it past the 1 year mark, you're probably going to be okay. But, if this thing's going to last 75 years, I don't think anything's going to last 75 years. There would definitely be rebuilding happening sooner than that. But I would rather have 20 years worth of stuff and, make it through the 1 year thing, the 5 year thing, the 10 year thing. Things are back to normal at 18 and a half years, and you weathered it because you kept putting stuff back. Kind of getting off on a tangent here. We're getting a little long. Things change based on where you live. If you're in a city, big city, small city, if you live out in the middle of nowhere. So, the biggest thing is think about your senses: sight, sound, smell. And think about normal. And if your community, your area, whatever, is going through something, the closer something seems to normal, the more likely you are going to have more eyes on you, and the more likely, people might take actions depending on their situation. And so you want to try to blend in and look like the masses as much as you can. You don't want people to know, I have 1,800 gallons of water, when the power's out and water's not running, and these people, you're out of water bottles at Walmart, and, people are filling up buckets at, the lake or river, and, trying to make it drinkable, when you're turning a faucet and you've got the water there. If people are hungry, you're not building a big old massive fire and making everything smell super great. If that's the situation, then you need to be prepared to confront that situation. How much charity are you going to provide? Are you going to say no? How are you going to deal with you having stuff and other people not having stuff? Which we can go into that topic for the next video. If you like this stuff, subscribe, share it with a friend or family member, leave your thoughts down below, like or dislike based off of what you listen to. And until then, I'll catch you in the next one.